When talking about abuse, what's the first thing coming to your mind? If you say you thought about physical abuse, domestic violence for women and children, I would say this understanding is correct but partial and incomplete. If you include emotional abuse and even narcissistic abuse, I would say this is more complete, but I would rather use abuse rather than narcissistic abuse because it may create an impression that narcissistic personality is something innate and cannot be changed, or even sometimes the people are not aware, so that they are not responsible for what they do or say. So today, I'd like to talk about abuse. If you are wondering in a relationship, for example, should I stay or should I go? This is the time you should be alarmed of whether you are in a potential abusive relationship. First and foremost, abusive relationship is not really a relationship. It doesn't belong to the category of dating, which I define dating as two people mutually investigate each other's character to see whether the other person is their suitable long-term partner. Whereas in an abusive situation, at least one person, oftentimes, the abuser is not looking for a long-term partner. This person is actually looking for a long-term prey. In that way, the mindset is not in the mindset of dating. So this topic doesn't really belong to the category of dating in my view, and once the so-called relationship tread into the water of abuse, it should be considered in a totally different category. This is very important, not just for the people in the situation, but also for those people around the person being abused, to be aware and support this person and not to treat that person as in a dating relationship. What is abuse? I would call in general anything one person is being intrusive on the other person, impose their own will on the other person, violate the boundary, not solicit the other person's opinion, not give room for disagreement, etc. are in the category of abuse. It could be explicit, such as physical abuse, criticizing, thinking you should act, think, speak in a certain way, patronizing, or it could be implicit. For example, manipulation, double standard, silent treatment, being passive-aggressive, victimhood, and of course, gaslighting, etc., etc. You can name it. I would give an example about a very subtle abusive situation. Recently, I went on an international trip, and on the flight to and back, I encountered these two situations respectively. The first situation, I was in an international airplane. There are 3 seats, of course, an aisle seat, a window seat, and the middle seat. I went, according to my ticket, I sit at the middle seat. And then there came a couple. The guy announced to me, we are actually a couple, and he was smiling, he acted kindly and nicely. So I got the point that he would prefer them to sit next to each other. Therefore, I moved voluntarily to the window seat. And when I moved to the window seat, he smiled even more, and he looked at me and said, that was my seat. So in this way, I first subtly agreed, voluntarily, without a word, agreed to accommodate to his needs by choosing to move to the window seat, and then he told me that wasn't the option. Then the option left for me was just to sit in the middle seat or in the aisle seat. The aisle seat is not my preference, so I stayed in the middle seat. And then he smiled more and said, we are super flexible. So this, I I would call it very nasty, and it does have manipulation and have gaslighting. He could have asked kindly, we are together and we would prefer to sit next to the window. If you don't mind, would you like to sit in the aisle? By the way, we are very flexible. If not, that's totally okay and we appreciate. Instead of doing that, he tried to manipulate me and make me sit on the aisle without explicitly asking. Another example was on the flight back. I was watching a movie on the window seat with my window up and open. And there was this man beside me. He was coughing. He was having all the COVID symptoms, but not wearing a mask. And he interrupted me. I had to pause and turn off pause the movie I was watching, and turn to him. And without talking to him, or maybe without talking to me, or maybe he tried to talk to me, but I wasn't understanding. So before I acknowledged and understood what he was talking about, he stretched out his hand and closed the window next to me while I was sitting in the window seat. Of course, in that situation, I recognized his aggression immediately, and I refused. I said, that's not my preference. Instead, I kept the window open, and he said nothing after that. I give these two examples because usually in both of the examples, I was a woman and the other person was a man, was taller, and we are living in this society, whereas women are generally accommodating, agreeable, and men are usually affirmative and sometimes more aggressive and demanding. So in usual case, the woman would accommodate to the man, and I suppose in both situations, these two men were getting their ways consistently. Therefore, it became their habit, or they may not even think there should be another way. However, I am pretty sure that very likely, if I were a man, they wouldn't act the same way. So we talked about a category of abuse. It could be physical, sexual, emotional. It could be light or severe. But one thing I'd like to point out is they are having the same mechanism. It doesn't matter what type of abuse, it acts in the person's head or emotions in a very similar way, and we cannot downgrade a certain type of abuse because it doesn't seem to be severe, or it doesn't have a physical component, or it is legally unjustifiable. It doesn't matter. Abuse is abuse. And oftentimes, abuse is not consistently vicious or violent. It has that warmth element of it. And sometimes abusive relationships are actually, almost all the time, are periodically warmth and charming, and the person appear attractive. That's one of the reasons many victims of abuse found themselves hard to leave. In these two cases I listed, in the first case, the guy smiled 3 times, and the 3 times were being demanding and trying to manipulate me into what he wanted without explicitly saying. And he wasn't vicious or wasn't trying to be non-cooperative, and this can be a mask about the abuse. So when we understand abuse, recognize it, that's the first step before deciding what to do and moving on to a healthy situation. One thing a lot of people ask was whether the abuser is aware, whether they have a control about it, whether it's because of their childhood trauma, etc. I would say the abuser is aware and they have the agency about what they do. Either or not abuser is abusive is because of their early childhood experiences or not does not justify their actions. One of the ways to see the abuser is aware is they act differently in front of a third party. Or a lot of people conduct domestic physical violence, for example, stopped doing so after they moved to a country, a new jurisdiction where the laws are different, and if continuously conduct physical violence, they would go to jail, have different consequence, then they stopped. That is sufficient to say they are aware and have agency over what they do. Oftentimes, the abuser claim what they do is not intentional. They may claim they are not intentionally harming you or hurting your emotions. This does not stand. This is like to say, I just cannot help hurting you. They choose to stay on the autopilot so they don't have to take responsibility of it, and they are claiming they don't have the agency to act or to turn it off. Sometimes in different situations, the abuser stopped abusing you, either it's in front of a third party or in a certain time period, or they face consequences. You can test out different situations and see whether they act differently. That's a way to know as well if you still cannot be convinced about it. Therefore, I prefer not to use narcissistic abuse or narcissistic personality disorder to describe abusive situation, because abuser is completely aware and 100% responsible of what they do. So I don't want to relate it to any personality situation indicating they didn't have agency. Third, the abuser will change, but not likely to change if not motivated. In order to change, according to Lundy Bancroft, they need to be called out by multiple people around them, as well as facing the consequence for them not changing. If they don't have consequence, they continuously taking advantage from their perspective, they won't have the motivation to change. Fourth, what the journey to change looks like. This is also in Lundy's book, that the journey to accompany the abuser to change could be exhausting and is one-sided. It's not a mutual relationship. If you are a partner of an abusive person and decide to stay and accompany this person's change under the condition that this person is aware and fully on board to change, the process could still be very one-sided, and it's not about you. It will be all about their growth and change at the time, and you would invest a bunch of resources and attention on them, and eventually leading to either they still not changing or they change, but it comes out as very hurtful process, and you may not even want to stay in the relationship after they changed. Fifth, what if you are in one abusive relationship? In summary, this is the time when you recognize it. It's the time to strengthen yourself, your values, your beliefs, and your opinions, your preferences, and design your life goals. Recognizing that leaving is a process, it could be very challenging. There are a lot of people being abused find it very difficult to even recognize it is abusive pattern, let alone to leave. And it has a very complicated emotional process. Therefore, it includes to integrate your own emotions and rationalities. You may have a polarized emotional reaction based on their polarized acts, and that is the time you need to step back and look more clearly at what in front of you, at what they are, and in that way you can reconcile your emotions and decide how to react and how to act. You may need to change and transform some of your beliefs. You may need to examine how to create a distance, either it's by the frequency of meeting them, or a personal time, or a personal space, or just a social space to voice out your different opinions. This is a vast topic, cannot be summarized by this short video, but in general, if you have not been aware of this situation, or if you have been aware and trying to learn about it, or if you are in one and trying to see how to get yourself out of it, or just to maintain some sanity while in it before you could get out, I highly recommend YouTube video and books by Lundy Bancroft. One of his books is Should I Stay or Should I Go? It's a fantastic book from a very professional standpoint, backed up by decades of cases and experiences. I highly recommend. If you have any thoughts and opinions, please comment below this video and we can carry out the dialogue further. Thank you. See you next time.